Case 1. Jeffrey Doucet. The execution, broadcast on live television. The camera is rolling. It's always rolling in airports. But this time, the local news crew knows exactly who's arriving. They've set up their equipment. They're waiting. Jeffrey Doucet, 25 years old, steps off the plane in handcuffs. He's being extradited from California back to Louisiana. The charge? Kidnapping and raping 11-year-old Gary Plauché. But Jeffrey Doucet will never see trial. Because 50 feet away, standing at a payphone with his back turned, is Jody's father, Gary Plauché, 49 years old, Air Force veteran, heavy equipment salesman, and tonight executioner. Gary's talking to his best friend Jimmy on the phone. He's wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, a disguise that wouldn't fool anyone. In his right boot, hidden from view, is a .38 snub-nosed revolver loaded with hollow point rounds. He whispers into the phone, "Here he comes. You're about to hear a shot." 25-year-old Jeffrey Doucet had been Jody's karate instructor. For over a year, he'd groomed the boy. Classic predator tactics. He became a fixture in the Plauché household. Gary and his wife June were separated at the time. Doucet exploited that vulnerability. He'd have Jody sit on his lap while teaching him to drive his 280Z, his hands wandering. During karate practice, he'd send the other students to the nearby 7-Eleven. Jody stayed behind for extra work in the back room. February 19th, 1984. Doucet came to the Plauché home. He told June he needed to borrow her car. He'd take Jody to help install carpet at his father's new home. He promised to return the boy that evening. He lied. Doucet drove to his uncle's home in Port Arthur, Texas. Then he took Jody on a 2,000-mile bus trip to Los Angeles. In Anaheim, California, near Disneyland, he dyed Jody's blonde hair black. He shaved his own beard. He checked into a motel and passed the boy off as his son. For 10 days, Jeffrey Doucet repeatedly raped 11-year-old Gary Plauché. February 29th, 1984, Leap Day. Doucet made a mistake. He let Jody call his mother collect from the motel. The FBI had wiretapped the Plauché phone. A Baton Rouge deputy sheriff was listening. They traced the call. They rescued Jody. A rape kit confirmed everything. On the flight back to Louisiana, Doucet confessed, not just to molesting Jody, to molesting other children. When Sheriff's Major Mike Barnett told Gary what Doucet had done to his son, Gary's response was immediate. "I'll kill that SOB." March 16th, 1984. Gary's drinking at a bar called the Cotton Club. He overhears a local television news executive mention that Doucet will be arriving at the Baton Rouge Airport that night, 9:08 p.m., exact time, exact location. An employee of WBRZ television provided the information. Gary immediately leaves for the airport. Baseball cap, sunglasses, the revolver in his boot. He positions himself at a bank of payphones. His back is turned. The WBRZ news crew sets up to record Doucet's arrival. They have no idea they're about to capture one of the most shocking acts of vigilante justice ever recorded. Deputies Bud Connor and Mike Barnett, Gary's friend, escort the handcuffed Doucet through the airport. Gary whispers into the phone, "Here he comes. You're about to hear a shot." He reaches for the gun in his boot. He spins around. He fires a single hollow point bullet into the right side of Jeffrey Doucet's head from approximately 3 feet away. The entire incident is captured on live television. Gary lowers the gun. He turns around. He hangs up the phone. As officers grab him, one asks, "Gary, why? Why, Gary?" His response becomes iconic. It echoes through decades of vigilante justice debates. If somebody did it to your kid, you'd do it too. Jeffrey Doucet falls into a coma. He dies the following day, March 17th, 1984. Gary Plauché is charged with second-degree murder. Now here's where it gets interesting. Psychiatrist Dr. Edward P. Uzi examines Gary. His conclusion? Gary Plauché could not tell the difference between right and wrong when he killed Jeffrey Doucet. The defense argues Gary was driven to a temporarily psychotic state after learning of his son's abuse. Gary tells his attorney he believed the voice of Christ compelled him to pull the trigger. He pleads no contest to manslaughter. Judge Frank Saya makes a decision that will shock legal observers nationwide. He rules that sending Gary Plauché to prison would not help anyone. He determines there is virtually no risk of him committing another crime. The sentence? 7 years suspended, 5 years probation, 300 hours of community service. Gary Plauché never serves a single day in prison, just approximately 3 nights in jail before posting $100,000 bail. He completes his community service at his local church, mostly cutting grass. He finishes by 1989. The killing sparks massive national debate, but in Baton Rouge, most people support Gary's actions. Many view him as a hero. Riverboat Captain Murray Curry tells reporters he's a father who done it out of love for his child and for his pride. An airport bartender offers a darker take. I'd have shot him too if he'd done what they say he'd done to my boys. Only, I'd have gut shot him 3 or 4 times and he'd have suffered before he died. But what about Jody, the boy at the center of this? Initially, Jody was upset and angry at his father. He told ESPN years later, "I didn't want him dead. I just wanted him to stop." He explained why he never told anyone about the abuse. "I knew he wasn't kidding. That's why I couldn't tell anybody." And that's exactly what he ended up doing. Eventually, Jody reconciled with his father. Their relationship returned to normal. Jody became a 4-sport letterman in high school. He attended Louisiana State University. He served on the executive board of Men Against Violence. He worked at the Victim Services Center of Montgomery County as a sexual assault counselor. He became a motivational speaker and child sexual abuse awareness activist. In August 2019, Jody published his memoir, Why, Gary? Why? The Jody Plauché Story. In 2024, he told the Mirror he was happy with his life and regarded his father as the greatest dad of all time. Gary Plauché? At age 67, he gave an interview stating he did not regret killing Jeffrey Doucet and would do so again. "If it had been your son who was sexually abused by a pervert, you would have done exactly the same thing I did if given my opportunity." Gary suffered a stroke in 2011 and a second in 2014. He died October 20th, 2014, at age 68, due to complications from a stroke caused by diabetes. He was buried following a mass of Christian burial at St. George Catholic Church. The video of the shooting, over 20 million views on YouTube, featured in Michael Moore's 2002 documentary, Bowling for Columbine. Jody still lives in Baton Rouge. He still speaks about child sexual abuse prevention, and he still has the shirt his father was wearing when he killed Jeffrey Doucet. The question America asked then, and still asks now, is simple. Was Gary Plauché a murderer or a hero? The law said murderer but gave him probation. The jury of public opinion? They bought t-shirts celebrating the kill shot. And somewhere in the middle of that debate sits a little boy who just wanted the abuse to stop, who got his wish, but who had to watch his father become a killer to make it happen. If you're already hooked by this first case, do me a favor right now, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you think about Gary Plauché's actions, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We've got 9 more cases to cover, and trust me, they only get more complicated from here. Now let's move to Case 2. Case 2, Daniel Driver. Maybe I'm not God, but I'm the closest damn thing to it. April 2nd, 1993, Jamestown Justice Court, Tuolumne County, California. An Old West-style courtroom that served as the backdrop for the film High Noon. Today, it becomes the backdrop for something far more dramatic than any Hollywood production. Daniel Mark Driver sits in his orange jailhouse outfit, handcuffs, and belly chain. He's 41 years old, a camp counselor at a Christian summer camp, and a convicted child molester who served only 5 months for his 1983 conviction before church members wrote letters to the judge attesting to his fine character. Today is his preliminary hearing for molesting at least 5 boys between the ages of 6 and 8. One of those boys is Willie Nesler. He was 6 or 7 years old when Driver abused him between 1986 and 1988. Driver fled when charges were filed in May 1989. He evaded capture for nearly 4 years, finally arrested in late 1992 following a shoplifting arrest in Palo Alto. For 4 years after the abuse, Willie became hypervigilant. He expected Driver to kidnap and kill him. He asked questions about suicide. He was once found with a gun. He would vomit from anxiety. This morning, Willie woke up sick to his stomach. He began vomiting before court. He continued vomiting at the courthouse. His mother is Ellie Nesler. Everyone calls her Ellie, born August 2nd, 1952, and today, she's about to become famous. Ellie Nesler had requested that Willie's testimony be videotaped, or that the hearing be closed, anything to spare her son from facing his abuser. Both requests were denied. When Daniel Driver arrives in court, he looks directly at Willie, and he smirks. Witnesses describe it as a mean, disgusted, and haughty look. Ellie lunges at Driver. Her sister Jan Martinez grabs her arm, holds her back. During the hearing, another mother comes out of the courtroom. She tells Ellie it's going badly. That Driver might walk free because the children are giving weak testimony. He got to the kids again, the mother says. During a recess, the judge is absent. Ellie Nesler reaches into her sister Jan Martinez's purse. She pulls out a .25 caliber Raven semi-automatic pistol. She positions herself behind the defense attorney, and she fires 5 shots into the left side of Daniel Driver's head and neck from 2 to 3 feet away. A 6th bullet misses, strikes the wall. Driver, still shackled, dies approximately 1 hour later. When authorities confront her, Ellie Nesler declares something that will echo through the halls of vigilante justice forever. I may not be God, but I tell you what, I'm the closest damn thing to it. She adds, he deserved to die. Maybe I'm not God, but I'll tell you what, I'm the closest damn thing to it for all the other little boys. And then, a mother's simple justification. My little boy can hold his head up now. He doesn't have to be afraid of Danny. Renowned defense attorney J. Tony Serra takes Ellie's case. The defense argues temporary insanity. Experts testify that Nesler suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, from her own childhood sexual abuse, and from her son's molestation. They argue she misperceived reality, that she believed authorities knew what she was going to do, wanted her to kill Driver, and facilitated it. The trial begins July 12, 1993, in Sonora, California, before Judge James Wheeler. August 12, 1993. The jury convicts Ellie Nesler of voluntary manslaughter. They reject first-degree murder, but find sufficient intent for the lesser homicide charge. But here's where things get complicated. Blood tests reveal Ellie Nesler was under the influence of methamphetamine at the time of the shooting. This damages her sympathetic portrait, erodes some public support. She also has a prior criminal record for auto theft. September 29, 1993. After 27 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Ellie Nesler legally sane at the time of the shooting. Though they concede some mental disorders do exist. Sentence: 10 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter. But public support for Ellie is extraordinary, unprecedented in modern vigilante cases. 2 area banks establish Ellie Nesler defense funds. Shops and honky-tonks collect cash in big glass jars. T-shirts and bumper stickers proclaim, "Nice shooting, Ellie." Approximately $40,000 is raised at spaghetti dinner fundraisers. Calls of support pour in from across the United States, from Canada, Italy, Spain, Denmark. Over 100 supporters gather outside the courthouse during her arraignment. They holler, "Free Ellie!" They wave bumper stickers. A bail bondsman posts her $500,000 bail. She's called the heroine of the mother lode. Her mother, Marie Starr, tells reporters, "We're like rattlesnakes. You don't know we're there until someone steps on us." Her sister Jan asked if Ellie is a hero. You betcha. One Jamestown bartender offers an even darker endorsement. Ellie's biggest mistake was her aim. She should have shot him lower, between the legs. But prosecutor Scott Thorpe offers the counter-argument. Hopefully, this will show people you don't take justice into your own hands. You especially don't do it while the criminal justice system is in the midst of its process. The California Supreme Court later overturns Ellie's conviction due to juror misconduct. She pleads guilty to manslaughter in exchange for release. October 1, 1997. After serving approximately 3.5 years, Ellie Nesler walks free. Upon release, she says, "Although I felt justified at the time, I can honestly say I'm sorry for taking a man's life. I urge anyone who feels compelled to take justice in their own hands to learn from my mistake." A TV movie airs in 1999, Judgment Day, the Ellie Nesler story, starring Christine Lahti. But Ellie's story doesn't have a happy ending. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1994 while awaiting sentencing. A family friend later says, "She went through all of it. She ended up homeless." October 2001, Ellie is arrested for selling methamphetamine to an undercover agent. She'd bought 10,000 pseudoephedrine tablets from a police informant. In 2002, she pleads guilty. She's sentenced to 6 years in prison for drug charges, released from a women's facility in Chowchilla, California, in June 2006. December 26, 2008, Ellie Nesler dies at UC Davis Medical Center from complications of breast cancer. She's 56 years old, 2 days before her grandson is born. But Willie's story? That's where this case becomes truly tragic. While his mother is in prison, Willie is raised by an aunt. He develops a juvenile record during his mother's murder trial. He becomes a teenage runaway. From 1999 to 2004, he's arrested and booked into county jail at least 18 times. Charges include robbery and drug-related offenses. Friends describe him as like a 12-year-old in a 25-year-old body, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 225 pounds, covered with tattoos of comic book characters. Late June 2004, Willie's mother is in prison for drug charges. Willie gets into a dispute with David Davis, 45, a disabled man with spine and neck injuries who'd been hired to clean up the family's property. Davis accuses Willie of stealing his tools. Willie attacks Davis. He's sentenced to 2 months in jail for assault. He reportedly tells police, "He's lucky I didn't kill him." July 25, 2004, 4 a.m., Willie is released from jail. Within 1 hour, he returns to the property. He kicks open the door to Davis's trailer. He drags him out, and he stomps on David Davis's head and neck repeatedly as Davis pleads for his life. "Not my head, not my neck, man. I got pins in my neck. Please don't hit me." David Davis dies July 26th after being taken off life support. Willie is caught 11 days later after surrendering to a Sacramento bounty hunter. Recorded jail phone calls capture Willie saying before the murder, "I'll kill him when I get out. I'll stomp on his head." 2005, Ellie Nesler is convicted of first-degree murder, sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. At sentencing, he says, "I've done bad things," but claims he's been railroaded by the criminal justice system. Willie receives additional prison sentences. 1 year for drug possession in 2013, 9 years for assault with a deadly weapon in 2019. In 2024, he's accused of involvement in the alleged murder of fellow inmate Timothy Whelan at Kern Valley State Prison. His sister Rebecca appears on Oprah in 2010. She says she doesn't think Willie would be in prison today if their mother hadn't killed his molester. He even stated he was over the molestation. What hurt all of us was Mom being torn away from us. Think about that for a moment. Ellie Nesler killed to protect her son, but her son says the protection destroyed him more than the abuse. The mother who declared herself the closest damn thing to God died of cancer and poverty. The boy she tried to save became a murderer, serving life in prison. The man she killed is still dead. And the question remains, did justice win that day in the Jamestown courtroom, or did everyone lose? This case shows the dark side of vigilante justice that nobody talks about. If this is making you think differently about these cases, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button now. We're about to get into Case 3, and it's a doozy. Case 3. Jesus Mora Flores, the Texas rancher who used only his fists. June 9, 2012. An isolated ranch near Shiner, Texas, Lavaca County, somewhere between Houston and San Antonio. 7 people are attending a barbecue on this Saturday afternoon. Among them, a 23-year-old rancher, his 5-year-old daughter, and a 47-year-old man named Jesus Mora Flores. Flores is a legal worker from Mexico. He'd been hired to help with horses on the ranch. Neighbors would later describe the young rancher as good as gold his whole life, a regular kid who went to dances, drank beer, known for saying yes sir and no ma'am. The 5-year-old daughter wanders toward a barn to feed chickens. Jesus Mora Flores follows her. He forcibly carries the girl into a secluded area behind the barn. A witness sees Flores take the child. The witness runs to find the father. The father sprints toward his daughter's screams. What he finds will change his life forever. His 5-year-old daughter, her underwear removed. Jesus Mora Flores, his underwear removed. The medical examination will later confirm what the father already knows in this moment. His daughter is being sexually assaulted. The father pulls Flores off his child, and he beats him with his bare hands. He inflicts several blows to the man's head and neck area using only his fists. When emergency crews arrive, they find Flores's pants and underwear pulled down on his lifeless body. Jesus Mora Flores dies from blunt force head and neck injuries. The father's 911 call is released publicly. It reveals his frantic emotional state. Listen to these actual words. "I need an ambulance. This guy was raping my daughter and I beat him up. And I don't know what to do. Pause, breathing heavily. Come on, this guy is going to die on me. I don't know what to do. Another pause. You can hear him crying. Hurry, he's dying on me. The father is crying throughout the call. His aunt and grandfather are attempting to revive Flores while waiting for paramedics. Think about that. The man who just beat someone to death is now desperately trying to save his life. The father is never arrested. June 19, 2012. The Lavaca County Grand Jury declines to return an indictment. No charges will be filed. District Attorney Heather McMinn explains. Under the law in the state of Texas, deadly force is authorized and justified in order to stop an aggravated sexual assault or sexual assault. All the evidence provided by the Sheriff's Department and the Texas Rangers indicated that's what was occurring when the victim's father arrived at the scene. Attorney Vianne Huser adds, he is a peaceable soul, and he had no intention of killing anybody on that day, but he has to live with that. Sheriff Micah Harmon notes the father had remorse, and it wasn't his intent to kill anybody. He was protecting his daughter and doing what he thought he had to do. Neighbor Michael James Veit tells CNN, any father would have done that. Everybody is saying the father is justified. This case becomes a landmark example. It demonstrates when deadly force is legally justified in defense of another person. The key factors? The assault was actively occurring. The father used only his hands, no weapons. He immediately called for help. He showed genuine remorse. He was protecting his child from an imminent threat. The law in Texas and in many states allows you to use deadly force to protect another person from aggravated sexual assault. The critical element? The threat must be immediate, active, ongoing. This father wasn't hunting down his daughter's abuser weeks or months later. He wasn't planning revenge. He was literally pulling a rapist off his 5-year-old child. And the law said, that's justified. But here's what they don't tell you in the news coverage. This man has to live with having killed someone with his bare hands in front of witnesses while his daughter screamed. Yes, he was legally justified. Yes, he was morally justified. Yes, he saved his daughter from further trauma. But he still has to close his eyes at night and see Jesus Mora Flores dying on the ground. He still has to remember the feeling of his fists connecting with another human being's skull, the sound of bones breaking. The moment life left another man's eyes. His attorney said he's a peaceable soul. Maybe he was. Before June 9, 2012, nobody asks what happens to the peaceable soul after it commits justified violence. Nobody talks about the nightmares, the therapy, the way you look at your own hands differently afterward. The grand jury said, you're free to go. But ask yourself, is he really free? His 5-year-old daughter is safe. That's what matters most. But at what cost to the man who saved her? This case demonstrates the clearest example of when vigilante justice is legally acceptable, active, immediate, proportional, necessary. But it also demonstrates something else. Even when you're completely justified, even when everyone agrees you did the right thing, even when the law clears you, you still have to live with what you've done. That's the price of protection. That's the cost of being a hero. And that's why this father's identity remains sealed. Because he's not a hero in his own mind. He's just a dad who did what any dad would do. And now he has to figure out how to be that dad again. The Texas case is probably the clearest example of justified force we'll see in this entire documentary. But it raises questions nobody wants to answer. Drop a comment and tell me, can you ever really go back to normal after something like this? And if you're getting value from this deep dive, smash that like button and share this video. Let's continue with Case 4. Case 4. Raymond Frolander. He's going to learn why I let him live. July 18, 2014. Daytona Beach, Florida. Approximately 1 a.m. A 35-year-old father walks into his 11-year-old son's bedroom. What he sees will trigger a rage, so pure, so focused, that it will make national headlines. His son, his 11-year-old boy, in bed, and on top of him, 18-year-old Raymond Frolander. Frolander isn't a stranger. He's not an intruder. He's a trusted family friend. He's served as the boy's babysitter. He's considered like family. And he's actively sexually assaulting an 11-year-old child. The father beats Raymond Frolander unconscious, using only his fists and feet. When officers arrive, they find Frolander motionless on the living room floor, several knots on his face, bleeding from the mouth, The father's 911 call becomes famous, not for panic, not for fear, but for its controlled fury, for the cold calculation in a man who's just discovered the worst betrayal imaginable. Listen to these actual words. "He is nice and knocked out on the floor for you. I drug him out to the living room." The dispatcher asks about weapons. "My foot and my fist." Then the father says something chilling. "I knew what was going on, and I did what I had a right to, except I didn't kill him." He continues, "He is breathing, but not speaking, in a puddle of blood on the floor, and I loved him up until 15 minutes ago." Think about that phrase. I loved him up until 15 minutes ago. 15 minutes earlier, Raymond Frolander was family, a trusted friend, someone this father had welcomed into his home, around his children. And now he's a predator who's been beaten so badly he's in a puddle of his own blood. The father speaks directly to Frolander's unconscious body. "You are damn lucky, boy, that I love my God." Then to the dispatcher, "Send him an ambulance. He's going to need one." The father later reveals something crucial. His son actually stopped him from killing Frolander. The boy begged his father to stop. "I would have killed Frolander if the victim hadn't stopped me," the father says. An 11-year-old child being sexually assaulted, who then has to watch his father beat his abuser unconscious, and who has to be the one to say, "Dad, stop, you're going to kill him." What do you think that does to a child? Here's what investigators discover. The abuse had been occurring for 3 years. Since the boy was 8 years old, Raymond Frolander had groomed his target over this entire period. He'd threatened the boy that terrible things would happen if he told anyone. The boy was afraid to come forward because he thought he would get hurt if he didn't comply. For 3 years, this father had no idea. For 3 years, he trusted Raymond Frolander. For 3 years, he let this predator into his home. The legal outcome for the father? No charges filed. Police Chief Mike Chitwood makes a statement that will resonate across America. "Dad was acting like a dad. I don't see anything we should charge the dad with." You have an 18-year-old who has clearly picked his target, groomed his target, and had sex with the victim multiple times. When asked if he had an issue with the father's actions, Chief Chitwood responds, "Not as a police chief, and not as a father." For Raymond Frolander, he pleads no contest to lewd and lascivious molestation of a child under 12. He admits to the ongoing abuse, says simply, "I'm guilty." He's sentenced to 25 years in prison. He took the plea deal to avoid mandatory life. Upon release, he'll face lifetime sex offender registration, lifetime sex offender probation, GPS, monitoring for life. At Frolander's sentencing, the father makes a statement that becomes the title of this case. He looks at Raymond Frolander and says, "He's going to learn in the next 25 years why I let him live." Think about what that means. The father is saying, "I didn't let you die out of mercy. I let you live so you could suffer." 25 years in prison as a known child molester. 25 years where every single inmate knows exactly what you did. Where you're at the bottom of the prison hierarchy. Where violence against you isn't just accepted, it's expected. The father gave Raymond Frolander a fate worse than death. The victim's grandmother shows remarkable nuance in her statement. "I feel for him. I wish somebody had gotten him help at some point, but this happened, and now the streets are free of a pedophile." She also says, "He was like our family, and it hurts that he did this." That's the complexity of these cases. Raymond Frolander wasn't a monster in a dark alley. He was someone they loved, someone they trusted, someone who betrayed that trust in the most horrific way imaginable. This case demonstrates another clear example of justified parental violence. The father caught Frolander in the act. He used no weapons, he called for help immediately, he showed remorse, he was protecting his child from an ongoing assault. But here's what keeps me up at night about this case. The boy had to watch it happen. An 11-year-old who'd been abused for 3 years had to watch his father beat his abuser unconscious. Had to be the one to say, "Stop, Dad, you're going to kill him." That child becomes the adult who has to carry both traumas. The trauma of 3 years of sexual abuse, and the trauma of watching his father become violent enough to nearly kill someone. Is he better off? Absolutely. Raymond Frolander is in prison and will be monitored for life. Is he healed? That's a different question entirely. The father did what any father would do, what any father should do. He protected his child with immediate, proportional force against an active threat. And now that child has to grow up knowing, my dad loved me enough to almost kill someone for me. Is that a gift or a burden? Maybe it's both. The Frolander case shows us that even when justice is served perfectly by the law, the psychological cost to everyone involved is immeasurable. What do you think? Did this father do the right thing by letting Frolander live? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're still watching, please hit that like button and subscribe. We're halfway through this documentary, and the next cases will challenge everything you think you know about justice. Let's go to Case 5. Case 5. Raymond Earl Brooks, 40 years for 13-year-old revenge. Berlin, Alabama, Cullman County, approximately 50 miles north of Birmingham, June 8, 2014. Jay Maynor gets on his motorcycle. He's just had an argument with his daughter, Julia. She's 24 years old now, mother of 3 children. And she's angry at her father about something that happened when she was 4 years old. 13 years ago, Raymond Earl Brooks pleaded guilty to sexually abusing Julia from approximately age 4 to age 8. Brooks was Julia's maternal grandfather by adoption. He'd adopted Julia's mother as an infant. Then he turned his adopted granddaughter into a victim. Brooks got 5 years in prison. He served only 27 months. Then he was released on parole, placed on the Alabama Sex Offender Registry, and life went on. But for Julia, life didn't go on. She testified years later, "I've tried counseling, and that didn't work, and it's still here today. I relive it every day. I struggle to get out of bed in the morning. I've overcome PTSD for a little while, and now I'm having to re-overcome something that hasn't happened in 14, 15, 16 years. He took my innocence away and only served like 18 months, and now I suffer daily from what Raymond did to me. Me and my husband are getting divorced because I pushed him out of my life. Even though we're married and have 3 kids, I thought it was better to separate than to keep making him miserable with my miserable life." June 8, 2014. Julia says something to her father in anger. She can't even remember the exact words later. Just something about the abuse, about Raymond Earl Brooks, about injustice. Jay Maynor snaps. He gets on his motorcycle. He drives to a convenience store. There's a man there who's been dating his stepdaughter, a man Jay believes has been abusing her. He fires several rounds into the occupied store. The man hides inside, escapes unharmed. Then Jay Maynor drives to Raymond Earl Brooks's home in Berlin, Alabama. Brooks is standing in his front yard. Jay Maynor shoots him twice. Raymond Earl Brooks dies. Jay Maynor is charged with first-degree murder for killing Brooks, attempted murder for the convenience store shooting. Here's where this case differs from every other case we've discussed. Jay Maynor pleads guilty, not because he thinks he's guilty, but to spare his daughter from having to testify about her abuse in open court. Julia explains. Basically, he took the plea deal so that I didn't have to relive the molestation and also be on the stand in front of a bunch of people talking about and bringing back memories of the molestation. My father was protecting me, like a father should do. He is an amazing father, actually the best. He loves us so much. November 14th, 2016. Jay Maynor is sentenced. 20 years for murder, 20 years for attempted murder, running concurrently. Total, 40 years in prison. When asked if she would take revenge if someone attacked her own children, Julia responds, "I would do it with no questions asked. No matter how many years I would lose, I would do it." Nearly 5,400 people sign a Change.org petition calling for Maynor's pardon. The prosecutor and defense attorney both say the petition will likely not result in any change. District Attorney Wilson Blaylock explains, "Regardless of the emotions from what may have occurred 12 years ago, we can't prosecute on emotions. We prosecute and try and uphold the criminal laws of the state of Alabama to the best of our ability, and that's what we did in this case." Here's why Jay Maynor got 40 years when Gary Plauché got probation. Timing. Gary Plauché killed Jeffrey Doucette within weeks of discovering the abuse. Jay Maynor killed Raymond Earl Brooks 13 years after the abuse ended, 11 years after Brooks was already convicted and sentenced. The law draws a clear line. If you're stopping an active threat, you're a protector. If you're hunting down someone years later, you're a vigilante. Jay Maynor also shot at an unrelated person that same day. That demonstrated he was a danger to the community, not just acting to protect his daughter. The killing wasn't defense, it was revenge. And revenge, no matter how justified emotionally, is murder under the law. Julia's statement at sentencing breaks your heart. Basically, he took the plea deal so that I didn't have to relive the molestation. Jay Maynor sacrificed his freedom for his daughter twice. First, by killing her abuser. Second, by pleading guilty to spare her from testifying. Julia says her father is an amazing father, actually the best. But he's serving 40 years in prison. He's in his early 50s now. He might not live long enough to see freedom again. Julia's husband left her. She struggles to get out of bed every morning. Her father is in prison for murder. Her abuser is dead. Is anyone better off? Raymond Earl Brooks got to live 13 years as a free man after serving only 27 months for abusing a child for 4 years. He got to walk around, see sunsets, eat meals, live. Julia got to see her abuser die, but she also got to watch her father go to prison for 40 years. Was it worth it? Julia says yes. She says she'd do the same thing if someone hurt her children, no matter how many years I would lose. The law says no. The law says you don't get to decide when someone deserves to die. That's what courts are for. That's what the justice system exists to determine. But when the justice system gives a child rapist 27 months for 4 years of abuse, when a predator walks free while his victim struggles to function as an adult, when the law fails so spectacularly that a father feels he has no choice but to execute his daughter's abuser, who's really failed here? Jay Maynor, now in his early 50s, remains incarcerated in Alabama as of 2026. He'll be in his 90s before he's eligible for release. His daughter Julia continues to struggle with PTSD. Her marriage ended. She's raising 3 children as a single mother while battling the trauma of abuse that happened over 20 years ago. Raymond Earl Brooks is dead. He faced justice from Jay Maynor, not from the system. And America is left asking, is 40 years in prison justice for a father who killed his daughter's abuser 13 years too late? The Maynor case is where public opinion really splits. Some people think he's a hero who got railroaded. Others think he's a murderer who chose revenge over law. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you're invested in this series, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got 5 more cases, and they get even more complex. Case 6 is next. Case 6. Michael Fossler. The 14-mile pursuit that defines 2026. October 8th, 2024. Approximately 1 a.m., Lonoke County, Arkansas. Aaron Spencer, 37-year-old decorated Army veteran of the 82nd Airborne Division, wakes up to his daughter's chihuahua barking frantically. The 82nd Airborne isn't just any military unit. It's an elite division trained to deploy anywhere in the world within hours. Aaron Spencer is a paratrooper who served in Iraq, a farmer, a general contractor, a father of 2. He checks his 14-year-old daughter's bedroom. What he finds? A stuffed animal wrapped in her hoodie under the covers. His daughter is gone. His wife Heather calls 911 at 1:12 a.m. The family discovers that 67-year-old Michael Fossler had still been in contact with their daughter, despite a no-contact order, through Cash App payments. 3 months earlier, July 11, 2024, Fossler had been arrested and charged with 43 criminal counts: internet stalking of a child, sexual assault, sexual indecency with a child, 36 counts of possession of child sexual abuse materials, rape. Despite these charges, Fossler was released on $50,000 bond with a no-contact order. And now, at 1 a.m. on October 8th, he's taken Spencer's daughter. Aaron Spencer jumps in his Ford truck. He begins searching rural roads about 10 miles east of their home. He spots Fossler's white Ford F-150. His daughter is in the passenger seat. Spencer pursues the vehicle, flashing his headlights, honking his horn. The chase continues for approximately 6 miles. At the intersection of Highway 31 and Highway 236, Spencer rams Fossler's truck into a ditch. He orders Fossler out of the vehicle at gunpoint. According to Spencer, his daughter tries to exit, but Fossler grabs her. Fossler then lunges towards him with something in his hand, shouting, "F you." Aaron Spencer fires 16 times with a Glock 19 Gen 4. He strikes Fossler 15 times. Then he pistol whips Fossler's face. He retrieves his daughter from the truck, reloads his weapon, calls 911 at 1:34 a.m. His words, "Michael Fossler is effing dead on the side of the road for trying to kidnap my daughter. I had no choice." October 9th, 2024. Spencer is released on $150,000 bond. Late November 2024. He's charged with second-degree murder with firearm enhancement, reduced from original first-degree. December 2024. Judge Barbara Elmore issues a broad gag order. May 2025. The Arkansas Supreme Court strikes down the gag order as overly broad and vague. January 26th through 30th, 2026. Aaron Spencer goes to trial. As this documentary is being produced, that trial is happening right now. The outcome will define how America views parental protection in the age of catch-and-release bail policies. Spencer's defense attorneys Aaron Casanelli and Michael Kaiser argue he was justified under Arkansas law in taking action to protect his daughter and himself. State law allows jurors to decide if someone reasonably used force to protect another person. The defense expects Spencer to testify so he can convey his own terror for his daughter's safety. Casanelli stated, "It is absolutely absurd to suggest that Aaron Spencer would sacrifice his daughter to a rapist, to a pedophile. I'm frankly stunned that that is even in anybody's mind." The prosecution argues Spencer had choices. He could have called 911 instead of pursuing Fossler. The prosecution notes that Spencer unlocked and used his phone between when his wife called 911 and when he killed Fossler. They also highlight a July 2024 incident where Spencer visited a Fossler acquaintance, seeking his address, asking them not to call police. This suggests premeditation, planning, not just protective instinct. Spencer's wife Heather gave a public statement. "Statistics and horror stories race through my mind. My baby, my little girl, all I could do was pray. I hung up with the 911 operator and called my mother. I screamed in horror while she prayed, 'Hail Marys.' My own screams will forever haunt my memory. In that moment we realized that she may have been taken, but it's the middle of the night and everything is happening in seconds, and every second counts. This case has changed nearly every part of our daily lives. Not long ago, my biggest concern was whether my sourdough was rising. My days were filled with baking. Now they're filled with therapy, appointments, legal updates. Over 361,000 people have signed a petition calling for charges to be dropped. GoFundMe shut down his legal defense fund. Supporters moved to Give, Send, Go. A state gun rights group declared his actions justified and established a defense fund. In October 2025, while awaiting trial for murder, Aaron Spencer announced his candidacy for Lano County Sheriff. Let that sink in. A man charged with second-degree murder is running for sheriff. And according to polls, he has significant public support. Here's what makes the Spencer case different from all the others. The system had already failed. Michael Fossler had 43 charges against him, including rape, including possession of child sexual abuse materials, 36 counts. And he was released on $50,000 bond. He violated the no-contact order. He contacted Spencer's daughter through Cash App. He groomed her, and then he took her. At 1 a.m., from her bedroom, while her parents slept. If Aaron Spencer had called 911 and waited for police, would they have found his daughter in time? Would she have been alive? Would she have been further traumatized? Or would Michael Fossler, facing life in prison, nothing left to lose, have done something desperate? These are the questions the jury will have to answer. The prosecution will argue, you chase someone for 6 miles, you ram their truck, you fire 16 times. That's not defense, that's execution. The defense will argue, your 14-year-old daughter is in a truck with a 67-year-old man charged with 43 counts of sex crimes against her. He's violating a no-contact order. He's kidnapped her from her bedroom at 1 a.m. Every second counts. You don't have time to wait for police. Who's right? By the time you're watching this documentary, we might know. The trial concludes January 30th, 2026. Aaron Spencer will either walk free, vindicated as a father who saved his daughter, or he'll spend decades in prison condemned as a vigilante who chose violence over law. The outcome will send a message to every parent in America. When the system fails, what are you allowed to do? The Spencer case represents the collision of 2 American values, trust in the justice system, and a parent's right to protect their child. Michael Fossler had been arrested, charged, and released. He wasn't acquitted, he wasn't exonerated, he was out on bond while facing 43 criminal counts. And he took Aaron Spencer's daughter anyway. Did Aaron Spencer have time to call 911 and wait? The prosecution says yes. Spencer had his phone, he unlocked it, he used it, he could have called. The defense says no. His daughter was in a vehicle with a predator, moving farther away every second. By the time police mobilized and located the truck, Fossler could have done anything. Could have gone anywhere. Spencer is a veteran of the 82nd Airborne, trained to make split-second decisions under pressure, trained to neutralize threats, trained to act decisively. Did that training save his daughter, or did it turn him into a killer? America is about to find out. And whatever the jury decides, half the country will be outraged. The Aaron Spencer case is happening right now as you watch this. By the time this documentary is a week old, we might know his fate. What do you think the jury should decide? Drop your answer in the comments. This is the most current case we're covering, and it proves these issues aren't going away. If you're engaged with this content, subscribe now. We've got 4 more historical cases to cover that show this debate has been raging for over a century. Let's go to Case 7. Case 7. Gabriel Quintanilla. When brothers become executioners. January 20th, 2022. Far, Texas, Hidalgo County, Rio Grande Valley. A 9-year-old girl makes an outcry. That's child welfare terminology for a disclosure of abuse. She tells her mother that her father, 42-year-old Gabriel Quintanilla, has been inappropriately touching her. The mother tells Quintanilla to leave their residence at an RV park. The girl's half-brothers, 18-year-old Christian Trevino and 18-year-old Alejandro Trevino, learn what their stepfather did to their little sister. They become enraged. Here's what's important. Gabriel Quintanilla had an outstanding warrant since 2019 for continuous sexual assault of a child, a different victim. Abuse from 2014 to 2016. He'd evaded arrest for nearly 3 years. This wasn't his first offense. He was a known predator, with an active warrant, who somehow was still free. First assault. The brothers confront Quintanilla at the RV park. A physical fight ensues. Quintanilla leaves on foot. Second assault. Christian runs after Quintanilla, finds him outside an apartment complex at Linden and Coyote in Far. Alejandro and friend Juan Eduardo Melendez arrive in a red Dodge Charger. They join the assault. Christian is wearing brass knuckles. The trio drops off Alejandro at his home. Third assault. Christian and Melendez change vehicles. Now they're in a white Ford F-150. They return to the area. They find Quintanilla walking alone on Veterans Road, already injured from the previous beatings. They beat him a third time with brass knuckles until he's unconscious. Then they place Quintanilla in the bed of the truck, drive to McCole and Whalen Road in McAllen, leave him in an open field. Police believe Quintanilla is still alive when abandoned. He dies from severe blunt force trauma to his head. A farmer discovers his body later that same day. The legal outcomes are complicated. Christian Trevino pleads guilty on October 27, 2025, to capital murder and aggravated assault, sentenced to 10 years in prison. His participation in all 3 attacks and use of brass knuckles weighed against him. Alejandro Trevino, case dismissed because he didn't participate in the second and third attacks after the initial confrontation. However, he faces an ICE immigration hold. Juan Eduardo Melendez, charges reduced from capital murder to manslaughter. Sentenced to 10 years deferred probation, will be set free. District Attorney Terry Palacios explained, one didn't have a weapon, and he was involved in just the kicking or punching. I don't think there was any intent to kill. I don't think we could have proved that. Why capital murder? DA Palacios explained that Quintanilla was kidnapped when he was taken in the back of the F-150 and dropped off somewhere else. The combination of kidnapping and murder triggers the capital charge. Under Texas law, a Change.org petition garnered over 727,000 signatures calling for the trio to be freed, one of the largest petition efforts for any vigilante justice case in American history. DA Palacios offered a stern warning. This should send a message that vigilantism will not be tolerated. But here's the question nobody wants to answer. Should it have been tolerated in this case? Gabriel Quintanilla had an active warrant for child sexual assault from 2019. 3 years earlier, he was on the run. He was evading authorities. And while on the run, he abused another child, his own 9-year-old daughter. Where was the justice system? How does a man with an outstanding warrant for child sexual assault remain free long enough to abuse another child? The Trevino brothers and Juan Eduardo Melendez didn't kill Gabriel Quintanilla to protect their sister. The assault had already occurred. The immediate threat was over. They killed him for revenge, for justice, because the system failed. And the law said, that's not your decision to make. Christian Trevino got 10 years. He'll serve time in prison for killing his sister's abuser, a man who was already a wanted fugitive. Alejandro Trevino walked free because he only participated in the first confrontation. He didn't chase Quintanilla down. He didn't beat him a second and third time. He didn't load him into a truck and dump him in a field to die. Juan Eduardo Melendez got probation. He participated in the second and third beatings, but he didn't use brass knuckles. The prosecution couldn't prove he intended to kill. 3 young men, 1 dead predator, 3 completely different legal outcomes. The difference? The level of involvement, the use of weapons, the number of attacks, the act of kidnapping and dumping the body. Christian Trevino crossed every line. Multiple assaults, brass knuckles, kidnapping, abandonment. The law couldn't ignore that, even if Gabriel Quintanilla deserved what he got. 727,000 people signed a petition saying Christian, Alejandro, and Juan should go free, that they were heroes, that they protected a little girl when the system wouldn't. But District Attorney Terry Palacio said, this should send a message that vigilantism will not be tolerated. Which message is right? If Gabriel Quintanilla had been arrested on his 2019 warrant, he never would have had the opportunity to abuse his 9-year-old daughter in 2022. If the system worked, Christian Trevino wouldn't be in prison right now. But the system didn't work, and Christian Trevino took justice into his own hands, 3 separate times, with brass knuckles, until Gabriel Quintanilla was dead. Is he a hero or a murderer? The petition signers say hero. The district attorney says murderer. The judge said 10 years in prison. Christian Trevino is currently serving his sentence. He'll be 28 years old when he's released. If he serves the full sentence, his little sister is safe. Gabriel Quintanilla is dead. The system that failed her for years will now spend 10 years punishing her brother for doing what it wouldn't do. Is that justice? The Trevino case shows what happens when people decide the system has failed too many times. 727,000 people agreed with what Christian did, but he's still in prison. What does that tell you about the gap between public opinion and the law? Drop your thoughts below. And make sure you're subscribed. We've got 3 more cases, including a shocking historical case from the early 1900s. Case 8 is next. Case 8. Robert Noce Jr., 42 years, for a 4th of July killing. Zachary, Louisiana, East Baton Rouge Parish, July 4th, 2015. Brittany Monk is 7 months pregnant. She's engaged to 21-year-old Jace Crehan. They're about to become parents. They're planning a life together. But Brittany Monk carries a secret that won't let her move forward, a trauma that shaped her entire childhood. Robert Noce Jr., 47 years old, sexually abused Brittany throughout her childhood. Noce had been her mother's boyfriend. After Brittany's mother abandoned her, Noce raised Brittany for approximately a decade. Defense attorney Franz Borgart would later state that Noce turned Brittany Monk into a sex slave as a child. June 21, 2015. Robert Noce Jr. pleads no contest to sexually molesting Brittany Monk. She testifies. She's expecting justice. She thinks Noce will serve 10 years behind bars. He receives 5 years probation. 5 years probation for turning a child into a sex slave for a decade. 13 days later, on July 4, 2015, Jace Crehan and Brittany Monk break into Robert Noce Jr.'s trailer at 3021 South Vernon Road while he's sleeping. Brittany sprays Noce with body spray while Jace wrestles with him. Brittany punches Noce 10 to 15 times while Jace holds him down. Jace stabs Noce 5 to 6 times. Noce is strangled with a belt. His wrists and ankles are bound with neckties. Prosecutors say Noce was nearly decapitated. His body is stuffed into a 55-gallon plastic winemaking barrel. The couple also floods Noce's trailer. When authorities confront Jace Crehan, he states, "What I did was not wrong, and he is not sorry." In recorded conversations, he portrays himself as Brittany's guardian, her protector, her hope. December 2017. Jace Crehan is convicted of second-degree murder by an 11-to-1 jury vote, sentenced to mandatory life without parole by Judge Tony Marabella. Brittany Monk pleads guilty to manslaughter in June 2017, sentenced to 35 years. But then something happens. 2020. The United States Supreme Court ruling in Ramos v. Louisiana outlaws non-unanimous jury verdicts. Jace Crehan's conviction is vacated. August 2021. He accepts a plea deal. Manslaughter, 35 years. Obstruction of justice, 7 years. To be served consecutively. Final sentence, 42 years in prison, with credit for 6 years already served. Prosecutor Darwin Miller argues, "We do not live in a country where we as a society are allowed to take the law into our own hands to do justice. That's what happened here. This is not a Shakespearean tragedy. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is the killing of a human being, whether you like him or not." Defense attorney Franz Borghardt counters, "Revenge is an act of passion, and this is very much an act of passion. We don't believe this is second-degree murder. We believe it's something else." District Attorney Hiller Moore III, "You don't want people going out and taking justice into their own hands. This is a cold-blooded, calculated, gruesome case. And you have 2 young people that did something bad and awful, wrecked the rest of their life and their families." Judge Fred Crafassi at the 2021 sentencing calls it one of the most heinous crimes he's dealt with in his 3 years on the bench. An absolute horror story. But then something extraordinary happens at sentencing. Robert Noce Jr.'s own daughter delivers a victim impact statement. She looks at Jace Crehan and Brittany Monk. And she says, "Jace and Brittany, I forgive you. Not for you, but for me. That's the healthy choice to make. I love you both and wish you well in your endeavors." Even Noce's own daughter understands what he did. Even she offers forgiveness to the people who killed her father. A Change.org petition calling for Jace Crehan and Brittany Monk's pardon garners thousands of signatures. But here's why Jace Crehan got 42 years. Premeditation. He and Brittany broke into Noce's home. They brought supplies. They planned it. Brutality. They didn't just kill Noce. They stabbed him repeatedly, strangled him, bound him, nearly decapitated him. Body disposal. They stuffed him in a barrel. They flooded his trailer. Time gap. Noce had already been sentenced. To probation, yes, but sentenced. The legal process was over. This wasn't defense. This was revenge. Unlike Gary Plauché shooting Jeffrey Doucet at the airport weeks after the rescue, Jace Crehan killed Robert Noce 13 days after Noce received probation. He had time to think, time to plan, time to reconsider. He didn't. Unlike the Texas father who beat Jesus' Mora Flores while stopping an active assault, Jace Crehan hunted down a sleeping man and executed him. Unlike the Daytona Beach father who caught Raymond Frolander in the act, Jace Crehan killed someone after the legal system had already addressed the crime. The law says, you don't get to decide the sentence wasn't harsh enough. You don't get to upgrade probation to death penalty. But Jace Crehan believed, and Brittany Monk believed, that 5 years probation for a decade of child sexual slavery was not justice. Were they wrong? Morally, millions of people would say, no, Robert Noce Jr. deserved to die. Legally, yes, absolutely yes. They committed premeditated murder. Jace Crehan is currently serving 42 years in Louisiana. He'll be 63 years old when he's released. If he serves the full sentence, Brittany Monk is serving 35 years. She'll be in her 50s when released. The child they were expecting, born while Brittany awaited trial, now being raised by family members, growing up with both parents in prison. Robert Noce Jr. is dead, the man who turned a little girl into a sex slave, who received 5 years probation, who was killed in his sleep by that little girl, now a woman, and her fiancé. Is justice served? The law says yes. Murder is murder. Premeditation is premeditation. Brutality is brutality. Public opinion says, it's complicated. Even the victim's own daughter said, I forgive you. But the judge said, 42 years. The Crehan case demonstrates the absolute limit of public sympathy. Even when everyone agrees the victim was a monster, when you plan it, when you make it brutal, when you dispose of the body, the law shows no mercy. What's your take? Does planning and brutality remove all justification? Comment below. And if you've made it this far in the documentary, you're clearly invested, hit that subscribe button, and let's power through the final 2 cases. Case 9 is a historical perspective. Case 9. Franz Crefeld, When Unwritten Law Ruled America. Seattle, Washington, May 7th, 1906. We're going back in time now. back to an era when American juries routinely acquitted men who killed those who sexually exploited their female relatives. This was known as the unwritten law. The formal defense was temporary insanity, but everyone understood the real meaning. Men had a right to violently defend the honor of their female relatives. Franz Edmund Crefeld, also called Joshua, was a German immigrant. He founded a cult in Corvallis, Oregon, beginning around 1903. Called the Brides of Christ, the press dubbed them Holy Rollers. Crefeld convinced mostly female followers to abandon their families and worldly possessions, to participate in purification rituals that involved sexual acts. Testimony indicated mothers were debauched in front of their daughters. Crefeld preached that one of his female followers would be the new Mary, the mother of the second Christ. He announced that 16-year-old Esther Mitchell was chosen for this role. George Mitchell was Esther's brother, an Oregon mill worker. He was tormented by the cult's grip on his sister Esther and another sister, Donna Mitchell Starr. Crefeld had been previously convicted of adultery in 1904. He served 17 months in prison, but after release, he revived the sect. Several families had members committed to the state asylum. May 7, 1906, George Mitchell spots Franz Crefeld walking with his wife Maud, daughter of Corvallis resident O.V. Hurt, on First Avenue in Seattle. Mitchell positions himself in front of the quick drug store at First and Cherry Street. As Crefeld passes, Mitchell shoots him in the back of the neck with a .32 caliber revolver. Franz Crefeld dies instantly. George Mitchell makes no attempt to escape. He surrenders to police, hands over his gun, sends a telegram to O.V. Hurt that reads, "I've got my man, I'm in jail here." Mitchell's defense is funded by O.V. Hurt, who hires one of Seattle's best law firms. The formal plea is insanity, but the underlying argument invokes the unwritten law. Here's where it gets remarkable. Multnomah County District Attorney John Manning writes to King County Prosecutor Kenneth McIntosh. The letter says, "I investigated many charges against him, the character of which were perfectly awful, insofar as being low, degenerate, and brutal. I think the taking of the law in one's own hands, under such circumstances, to mete out summary justice, is almost excusable." Almost excusable, from the district attorney. Witnesses testify that Crefeld practiced free love, that George Mitchell had been told of the sexual exploitation of women, including 16-year-old May Hurt, that his sister Esther had been selected as the new Mary. George Mitchell is acquitted, immediately released. The case makes headlines across North America. But here's the tragic twist. Just 2 days after the acquittal, as George Mitchell is about to board a train to Portland at the Union Depot, his sister Esther shoots and kills him, using a pistol purchased with witness fees. The Seattle Daily Times reports Esther says George had killed Joshua and must die for his crime. Esther Mitchell is found not guilty by reason of insanity, committed to Western State Hospital. She's released in 1909. Maud Crefeld, Franz's widow, later commits suicide. Police Chief Charles Wappenstein offers a weary comment. "I wish these Oregon people would kill each other on their own side of the river." The unwritten law peaked in American jurisprudence from approximately the 1890s through the 1920s. A Portland Morning Oregonian editorial from 1890 explained the concept. There are certain gross offenses against persons, against the family relations, against woman, against virginity and domestic chastity, too profound and far-reaching in individual cases to be punished adequately by any penalties prescribed by the law for all cases alike. The defense was formally argued as temporary insanity, but everyone understood men had a right to violently defend the honor of their female relatives. By the 1920s, such claims became much less frequent as courts grew more skeptical, though acquittals still occurred. The unwritten law was essentially for men only. Women who tried to claim similar protections were generally unsuccessful. Think about what the unwritten law represents. A time in American history when juries representing community values openly nullified the law, when they said, yes, this was murder, but it was justified murder, because the victim had violated sacred boundaries. Franz Crefeld sexually exploited women in a religious cult. He turned daughters against their families. He preached free love and practiced predation under the guise of spiritual purification. And when George Mitchell shot him in the back of the neck in broad daylight on a Seattle street, the jury said, "Not guilty." The prosecutor, the district attorney whose job is to seek convictions, wrote a letter saying the killing was almost excusable. That's how far community standards have shifted in the past 120 years. Today, if George Mitchell shot Franz Crefeld, he'd be facing life in prison, no question. In 1906, he was acquitted after a short deliberation. Newspapers celebrated another victory for the unwritten law. But the victory didn't last long. 2 days later, Esther Mitchell, the 16-year-old girl her brother thought he was saving, killed him for destroying her Messiah. George Mitchell died believing he'd protected his sister from a predator. His sister believed he'd murdered her savior. Who was right? From our perspective in 2026, Franz Crefeld was clearly a predator, using religion to sexually exploit women and girls. George Mitchell was clearly protecting his sisters. But Esther Mitchell, one of the sisters being protected, disagreed so strongly that she committed murder to avenge Crefeld's death. The unwritten law cases reveal something crucial about vigilante justice. Sometimes the people you're protecting don't want to be protected. Sometimes they've been so thoroughly manipulated that they'll defend their abuser, even kill for their abuser. George Mitchell thought he was a hero. His sister thought he was a murderer. The jury thought he was justified. The law thought he was insane. And 2 days after his acquittal, he was dead, killed by the sister he thought he'd saved. The unwritten law era ended not because courts suddenly decided vigilante justice was wrong. It ended because society changed, because women gained more rights, because the idea that men owned their female relatives' honor became antiquated. But the impulse, the rage that drives parents to kill those who hurt their children, that hasn't changed at all. George Mitchell in 1906 felt exactly what Gary Plauché felt in 1984, exactly what Aaron Spencer felt in 2024. The only difference? The century they lived in, the laws that judged them, the juries that decided their fates. The unwritten law cases show us this debate is over a century old. The names change, the weapons change, the laws change. But the fundamental question remains, when does a parent's protective instinct become murder? We're down to the final case, and it's one that went horribly, tragically wrong. Make sure you're subscribed, because Case 10 is a cautionary tale that shows not all vigilante justice has a satisfying ending. Here we go. Case 10. Antonio Harley. When vigilante justice goes wrong. DeKalb County, Georgia, April 1st, 2020. 3:30 a.m. Danielle Harris, 42 years old, walks into the DeKalb County Police Department Special Victims Unit. She has a video. A video showing her 12-year-old daughter engaged in a sexual act with 22-year-old Antonio Harley. The video depicts clear sexual abuse of a minor. The officers take her report, they open an investigation, and they warn her, do not let her anger get the best of her, and not to try to get revenge. Hours later, Danielle Harris gathers a large group of people. At least 3 people in her group are armed with firearms. She has her daughter identify Antonio Harley's apartment at a complex near Wesley Chapel Road and Snapfinger Road. They drive to the apartment complex. They knock on the door. When Antonio Harley appears from the side of the building, they chase him. Harley retreats inside his apartment. 5 younger siblings are also inside. Someone in Harris's group fires through the door, strikes Harley in the chest. Harley's brother fires back, protecting 5 younger siblings. Juan Newkirk, 19 years old, who accompanied Danielle Harris, is fatally shot in the exchange. March 22, 2024. Danielle Harris is convicted of felony murder, aggravated assault, conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sentence: life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 5 years. Antonio Harley survived. He faces pending charges of statutory rape, child molestation, and sexual exploitation of children. District Attorney Sherry Boston characterizes Harris as trying to take the law into her own hands. This is the case that shows what happens when vigilante justice goes catastrophically wrong. Danielle Harris did everything right at first. She found evidence of abuse. She immediately reported it to police. She went to the Special Victims Unit. She cooperated with investigators. The system was working. But then she decided the system wasn't working fast enough. Or maybe she didn't trust it would work at all. She gathered a group. Armed members of that group drove to the perpetrator's home and initiated a confrontation. Someone fired through a door, into an occupied apartment, where 5 children were present. A 19-year-old died. Not Antonio Harley, Juan Newkirk, a teenager who came along to support a mother seeking justice for her daughter. Antonio Harley was shot but survived. He'll face charges, but he's alive. Danielle Harris got life in prison. With the possibility of parole, yes, but life in prison. Her 12-year-old daughter? She has to grow up knowing her mother is in prison for trying to avenge her. That a 19-year-old died because of what happened to her. That her abuser survived while everyone around him paid the price. This case demonstrates everything that can go wrong with vigilante justice. Premeditation. Harris gathered a group hours after filing a police report. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. Armed participants. At least 3 people had firearms. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about violence. Collateral damage. A 19-year-old who wasn't even the target died. Endangering children. 5 children were in that apartment when shots were fired. No immediate threat. Harley wasn't actively assaulting Harris's daughter. The abuse had already occurred. The video already existed. Police already had evidence. Compare this to the Texas father who beat Jesus's Mora Flores. That father interrupted an active assault. He used only his hands. He immediately called for help. No one else was endangered. Danielle Harris brought a group of armed people to an apartment complex. Someone fired into an occupied home. A teenager died. The law shows absolutely no mercy in these circumstances. The prosecutor didn't argue about whether Antonio Harley deserved confrontation. Didn't debate whether Danielle Harris's rage was justified. Simply said, she tried to take the law into her own hands. And when you take the law into your own hands this way, with planning, with weapons, with multiple people, resulting in death, the law responds with the harshest possible sentence. Life in prison. For a mother who found evidence that her 12-year-old daughter was being sexually abused, who reported it to police, who was told not to seek revenge, and who sought revenge anyway. Is Danielle Harris a criminal? The jury said yes, unanimously, on multiple counts. Is she a victim of a system that moves too slowly, that might not have prosecuted Antonio Harley vigorously enough, that might have let him plead down to a lesser charge? Maybe, but the law says that's not your decision to make. You don't get to bypass the system because you don't trust it. You don't get to show up at someone's home with armed friends and create a shootout that kills a teenager. Even when your daughter was the victim, even when you have video evidence, even when you're absolutely certain of the perpetrator's guilt, you don't get to do that. And if you do, you get life in prison. Antonio Harley will face charges. He'll likely be convicted based on the video evidence. He'll go to prison for abusing a 12-year-old child. But he's alive. Juan Newkirk is dead, 19 years old, shot and killed trying to help a mother get justice for her daughter. Danielle Harris is in prison for life. Her daughter has to visit her behind glass, if she visits at all. 5 children who were in Antonio Harley's apartment that night had to witness a shooting, had to watch their brother fire a gun in self-defense, had to see Juan Newkirk die. And a 12-year-old girl has to carry all of this, the abuse, the video, the confrontation, the death, her mother's life sentence. All of it. This is what happens when vigilante justice goes wrong. Not in the sense that the wrong person is targeted. Antonio Harley did abuse that child. The video exists. But wrong in the sense that the methods destroy everything. That the collateral damage is catastrophic. That the outcome leaves everyone worse off. If Danielle Harris had trusted the system, just waited for investigators to do their jobs, Antonio Harley would likely be in prison right now. She would be free. Juan Newkirk would be alive. But she didn't trust the system, or couldn't wait, or believed the system would fail her daughter the way it's failed so many victims. And now she has life in prison, and Antonio Harley has a defense attorney arguing that he's the victim of vigilante violence. The case that should have been straightforward video evidence of child sexual abuse is now complicated by a shooting, a death, and a mother facing life in prison. That's what happens when you take the law into your own hands and it goes wrong. This final case is the cautionary tale, the warning, the example of what happens when vigilante justice isn't clean, isn't immediate, isn't proportional. Danielle Harris will spend the rest of her life in prison for trying to protect her daughter. Was it worth it? Could she have waited? Should the system have moved faster? These are the questions that haunt these cases. If you've made it through all 10 cases, I want to hear from you in the comments. Which case of affected you most? Do you think any of these parents were justified? Where do you draw the line? And please, hit that subscribe button and share this documentary. These stories need to be told. Thank you for watching Buried Secret Media. Closing. 10 cases. 165 years. From George Mitchell in 1906 to Aaron Spencer awaiting trial in 2026. The names change, the weapons change, the laws change. But the fundamental question remains the same. When does protection become murder? Gary Plauché served no time. Jay Maynard got 40 years. The difference? Timing. Minutes. Sometimes miles. The Texas father walked free. Danielle Harris got life. The difference? Method. Collateral damage. Who died? The law draws lines. Immediate threat versus revenge. Active assault versus delayed retribution. Bare hands versus weapons. One victim versus multiple casualties. But for the parents, they all felt the same thing. That primal rage, that protective instinct, that moment when you realize the law won't save your child, so you have to. Some of them were right, some were wrong. Some walked free, some will die in prison. And all of them have to live with what they did. Is Aaron Spencer a hero or a killer? By the time you watch this, a jury may have decided. Was Ellie Nesler justified? She served 3.5 years. Her son is serving life. Did Jace Crahan deserve 42 years? Even the victim's daughter said, "I forgive you." These aren't easy questions. They don't have simple answers. What they have is this. They're real. They happened. And they'll keep happening. Because as long as predators exist, parents will face this choice. Trust the system, or take justice into your own hands. And America will keep debating where protection ends and murder begins. This has been Buried Secret Media. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the cases that challenge everything we think we know about justice. Until next time.